In this video, we're gonna learn about a little bit about CSS and CSS basics. Since this is a HTML course, we're not going deep into CSS. We're just gonna learn a little bit to make our HTML look better, and there will be a whole course dedicated for CSS that will go much more into details. So if we come back to here, we already know where this is. This is the single website file called website, and it's HTML file, and I'm using Visual Studio and Live Server. So here we have basically, we don't have anything here. It's empty. We just have the title inside the header. And we talked about last time the actual content that goes here goes inside the body. So let's just have something to show up here, some HTML to basically style, and I'm just going to use a paragraph, and I'm going to copy dummy text here. So let's just copy this dummy text and then basically paste there. And now that's all we have. Now we're gonna change the style of this. We're gonna see how to do that. And now there are multiple ways to add CSS to your document. There are actually three ways. One is called internal CSS, one is called external CSS, and one is called an inline CSS. Inline CSS. So we're actually comment this out. This is how you kind of comment a code. But anyway, so let's do with the inline first. Actually, let's make the inline go top because it's easier. So basically every HTML element has a style property that you can find. So style, and then let's just call it red. So there is a style property. So, and then you basically pass a CSS code there, and CSS code contains two things. Number one, it has a property name. So for example, the color property and a value of what we wanted the color to be, in this case red. And they're connected by a semicolon and a bicolon, and then at the end that semicolon you just close that. And we can add multiple things here. So we can add, for example, we can add a background color called yellow, and then basically you list it like that. So the first one which ends with a semicolon, the second one which ends another semicolon, and that's how you add. This is inline because it's literally inside the tag. So the element. So if we copy and paste this, now we have two of them, and let me just remove this right here. So if you look at this, the second one doesn't have the styling properties. Only the first one has it because we actually explicitly gave that. There is actually a better way to do this. This is kind of the worst way to do it because it you're mixing your CSS and HTML code. And the next step to this, so this is done. The next step would be internal. Internal, which we're gonna do now, is instead of being inside here, we're gonna make inside the document itself. So we can actually copy our CSS because we're gonna need that, and then I'm gonna remove that. And now we can add a style property inside the header. So it would be element, and then inside this style, that'd be fun. So we have a style here, and then we need a way to select the content we're showing up here. Now there are multiple ways to select it. One of the most common ways is the name of the HTML elements, in this case B, and then you basically open curly braces to put whatever you are trying to put in here. So now we have this too. Now we put it in there. You can actually see right here now it affects both B's, and the reason is it's selecting all B's in this document, and we have two B's in this document. If we have, for example, if we have the horizontal line, our horizontal line stays black. If we have H1, which is kind of a header called header, H1 stays black. So, and then you can add multiple. For example, we can add H1 right there, and now our H1 will also be added to the styling. But what if you just want the first to have the style and none of the rest, right? Because when we had the inline, we could do that, but now we cannot do that. There's actually a nice way to do it, which is called by creating an ID. So you can give an ID value to this, and you call it first. So we have an ID property here called first, and now we can select it by the ID. So here we can select by first. It's not gonna work. We have to specify it's actually an ID, which means we put a hashtag in front of it. And if I save this, now I can say I only affected the first one because I'm selecting by the ID. If I take this and I put the ID inside, say H1, now H1 is gonna have the changes because we're selecting by ID, which the H1 have. Now, IDs is supposed to be identified by a single thing. So, for example, these two, although you can actually do that, they should never share the same ID. That confuses the browser. So, if ID cannot be shared, how do we make this possible? What if we want to make this change right here in both places? Now we're gonna use something called class, and we're just gonna copy this. And class is just that. So instead of being hashtag, it just says that, and let's call it second. And now we can share that, call it class, and our class is second. And then if I save that, actually I want to make this black, and then I want to make this lime. And then we have second. Can I spell it correctly? Boom. So now we can use that class for multiple places, and that's what you will do. So for example, here we can give a class called second, and you can do multiple classes by just giving the name after it. So you can have like third if you add another class, for example. That works. So that is how you'll select it by ID, by tag name, or by class name. Now you can add this code as an external file. So we talked about this, which is what we're doing right now. An external file means you create a whole another file. So for example, in here we can create a file called style. It's called style CSS, and basically we just copy our CSS code inside here. So paste right there. And now in here we remove this, we don't need that, and then we have to connect our HTML to our CSS file. So the way you connect it is called link. So link, it's a style sheet. What we are connected to style sheet, and then here is kind of the location. So you say in this file, and then you select that. So if I save this, our change state. So let me actually comment this out. So now there is nothing, but when we connected to it, now we're actually getting the change from here. I'm gonna go back to the previous way because I don't want to keep changing the files, but that is the best way to do it, because you put your whole CSS file in another code in another file, which means you can use in multiple different places. You just have to connect it to that. So I'm gonna go back to the one we had before, the internal. So basically this is it, and kind of okay, cool. And this is what we had before. Now, as you can see, I'm gonna go to the. Now we're gonna cover. Now we only have this. Now there are multiple ways you can do it. There's multiple properties that you can change, and I want to show you the kind of the best ones. We have a color. We have a background color. I'm gonna add a border to say 2 pixels solid black, and don't worry about the border. You can do your own research later. So every HTML element has something called the box model, and it's basically you have the content, you have a padding, so a space, you have a border, and then you have a border after the space before the next document. So in this case, for example, we can, if we say the padding is 20 pixels, now you see the distance between the content and the border increased because we increased that space. If we make this 50, it keeps increasing. So that is the padding. Now there is so let's just make this 10. The margin is outside the border and then before the next element. So if I say a margin of 50 pixels, now the whole box gets small from all angles. Now all these different margin and padding have their own space. So if I could say like left, now it just moves. Let me actually move 50 so you can see better. now it moved 50 pixels from this way. You can have a top, which means it will move 50 pixels from top. You have bottom, which means it will move 50 pixels there, and we have right, which means it will move 50 pixels from here. So you have one port margin or padding, and then you can move in either direction. Yeah, that's all I wanted to cover in this specific video.